Hello there, my name is Dr. Bethany Nichols, but you can call me B, and you're listening to the very first episode of The Biologist of It, which is a podcast where we get to the gist of what it is that different biologists do. And in every episode, I'm going to be interviewing a different biologist to really pick apart what it is that they do using pop culture references. So books, movies, TV shows, so it should all be good fun. And if that sounds like something that you're interested in, make sure that you follow or subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And I'm going to be on podcasts and also on YouTube. So whatever format you would like to stream this in, you are very welcome to do that. As you can tell today, well, for those of you who are listening rather than watching, there is nobody here but me, my monstera, and my rubber plant. So I have no one to interview. But instead, for this episode, I'm going to be introducing myself and the research that I do so that I can show you how this format is going to work over the next couple of weeks. You can make a decision about whether or not you like me, you like the format of the show, and you care at all what biologists do. But the reason that I wanted to do this was because as a biologist, when I meet other biologists, I often have no idea what they're talking about. Because biology is such a broad topic and is really interdisciplinary. So you end up with biochemists and biophysicists and biogeographers and biologists who work on other planets. So it's a really broad topic area, and it's impossible to know everything about all of those different areas. And so using something like a pop culture reference is a really good way of being able to make the science simple enough that you can really quickly communicate what it is that you do between different areas of the field. So hopefully this is going to work out really well. The interviews I've done so far have been really interesting, so I can't wait for you to hear those. But to get started, I thought it would only be fair to introduce myself and try to explain my own research with a pop culture reference, just to prove that it can be done. So let me reintroduce myself. Hi, I'm Dr. Bethany Nichols, but you are more than welcome to call me B. It's much less of a mouthful. And I'm a fellow at an agricultural plant research centre. And what that means is that I've done my PhD, so I'm a Doctor of Science, and I'm doing research. But the difference between being a postdoctoral researcher and a fellow is that I have more independence over the research that I do. And the institute that I work at is called the John Innes Centre. You might know us from the soil, which is a bit of a misnomer because we, although the owner of the John Innes Institute, the original founder, invented the method for producing the soil, we actually don't produce any soil at our institute. So I'm just going to nip that one in the bud, just in case anyone has any questions. Maybe you didn't. That's fine too. Anyway, moving swiftly along. I am a fellow, and the research that I have decided to undertake is to look at the environmental effects on oilseed rape. So oilseed rape is a plant. If you live in the UK, you might have seen massive yellow fields of the stuff, and it's very smelly in springtime, but it is really beautiful. It sort of lights up the landscape with this great, beautiful yellow shine. And oilseed rape is a commercial oil, so the pods produce this oil that can be used to fry foods. So it's very important, and you'll actually probably know it more commonly as vegetable oil. So if you have a look on the back of your vegetable oil at home, there's a chance it'll either say sunflower oil or it will say oilseed rape. And what I want to know is how the environment affects the growth of oilseed rape so that we can improve how much oil we get out of the individual plants. And to do that, I use computers. And so that I can explain this in a way that hopefully anybody would understand, so long as they've seen specifically Edward Scissorhands. So, ignoring most of the movie, at the very beginning, there is an inventor, And he has a conveyor belt. And on the conveyor belt, there are different robots that have different jobs that help the conveyor belt along. So the conveyor belt is responsible for producing cookies. And each of the robots has a different task on the conveyor belt to ensure that the cookies get made. So there's a cookie that makes the mix. There's the robot that cuts up the batter. There's a robot that bakes the cookies. And then at the end, you have cookies. And this automation of this process means that the inventor then ultimately oversees the job and can eat the cookies. So a big win. And in this situation, I am the inventor, which is good news for me. And each of these robots, I don't actually have robots, but I have my computer. And I task my computer, I write different systems that my computer does that undertake different tasks. So my computer is the conveyor belt, and all of the systems that I make are the robots that produce a different task. So at the moment, my conveyor belt is producing genes that respond to different environmental conditions. So how does this work? I'll try to do this quite briefly. So I have 3 robots in my conveyor belt. The first robot is a greenhouse over in Aberystwyth called the National Plant Scientist. It's really interesting. Anything that I talk about here that I flag as really interesting, I will put on my Twitter and on my Instagram at Biologist of it, so that you can have a little bit more of a dig around if any of this stuff interests you. And what the greenhouse does is there are plants in individual trolleys, and they go round a conveyor belt within the greenhouse, not part of my computer conveyor belt, an actual tangible conveyor belt that goes around the greenhouse, and each individual plant goes into an imaging room every day and has its photo taken from several angles, and then carries on. And they all go around this little conveyor belt every day. At the end of an amount of time, those images are compiled and sent to me in Norwich. So my first robot is the greenhouse, and the thing that it produces is this collection of images. And these images are time series images of each individual plant growing day by day. And this is really useful information because I can see how they grow and develop over a course of time. So then we go down the conveyor belt to Robot 2, and Robot 2 is a machine learning program. And what it does is it looks at the images and it recognizes traits that I've taught it to recognize. So I've told it, this is a leaf, this is a stem, this is a flower, and it recognizes those things and it can pick them out in the images. And so looking at the time course images, it can tell me at what point in time those different things developed, and can give me an idea of the developmental time series of each individual plant. And then it sends out that information. That goes down the conveyor belt into the final robot, who has the list of the developmental time course data from the second robot, and it combines that with some genetic data that I've taught to it previously. So what's genetic data? What does that mean? So DNA exists in all organisms. It's like the book of life. And not only does it determine how we grow, but also what happens within us every day. So, for example, after you eat a meal, you produce something within your stomach that helps to break down the food. But if it did that all the time, then we would essentially dissolve ourselves. We would just, it would be a massive waste of all of those chemicals would waste away if we were constantly producing this stuff. And so instead, we only do that when we've had a meal. So what that means is that genes that are responsible for creating this stuff are only switched on, I'm saying in inverted commas, switched on after we've had a meal. So parts of the DNA are only switched on at certain times. And I've given my robot a list of genes that are switched on at different times. How we gather that information is a whole other podcast. It's a whole other episode that hopefully I'll get someone in to do in the future. So I've given it the list of what's switched on at different times, and the second robot has given it a list of traits that are switched on at different times. And this robot is really clever and is able to match traits with genes. So what this means is it can have a look at a gene that was switched on at a certain time and look at the genes that were on at the same time as that and match them up. And that gives us an idea of which genes are responsible for which traits. Hopefully that makes you go, that's very interesting. But what can you possibly do with that be? Well, different genes can be turned on or off under different environmental conditions, and different varieties of oilseed rape will have different genes. So if I know that a certain gene is better equipped to deal with frost, for example, I can see which varieties have that gene, and then I can label those varieties as more frost resistant. So this is really useful information that we can get out of this very simple, well, seemingly simple system of taking pictures of plants, looking at the traits, looking at the genes related, and then finally saying these are the varieties that are better equipped for these environmental conditions. So that's what I do with my system at the moment. And so me as the inventor, I've set this system up, but I'm constantly looking at ways to upgrade each of my quote unquote robots and to make sure that they are constantly working and upgrading them whenever they need. And sometimes they break down. And when they break down, I need to be there to make sure that they are working again. And I also build robots, not just for myself in this conveyor belt, but I build robots for other people. If they have a job that they need to be done, I can create a robot that does that, and I can send it off to them and teach them how to use it. So that's me. I'm the inventor. But I specifically wanted to be related to the Edward Scissorhands inventor because one of my robots, Robot 2, as I said, is a machine learning robot. So he's my Edward Scissorhands, if you will. Although he's not a humanoid robot who lives in small town America and has a wonderful romance and hopefully lives happily ever after, potentially, I don't know. Well, actually, I'm just remembering the end of the movie. I haven't seen the movie in a while, actually. This is one of the things that I'm slightly worried about for some of the interviews, is to make sure that I know the pop culture reference ahead of time well enough that I will actually be able to engage in it, because otherwise it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. So I'm hoping this podcast will not only improve my knowledge of biology, but also just pop cultural references as well. It's going to be a real experience. So Edward Scissorhands. Sorry, I'm trying to get back on track. My Robot 2 is Edward Scissorhands to me because I've given it machine learning. I've given it the option of learning things, artificial intelligence. And so the way that works is really interesting. So this is something new. This is a new part to my job that I haven't done previously in like any amount of depth. So what this means is that I do something called supervised machine learning, which is where I have taught a machine learning program the different parts of the plant, and then it can look at something and it can recognize the patterns and tell me where those parts of the plants are from new images, which is very exciting, and it massively speeds up the process because you can do this. You can do lots with regular computer vision, which is where you just show a computer something and you say, tell me how many straight lines there are in this, and it's able to do that. By adding this step of machine learning, you're asking it to recognize concepts rather than shapes or colors and textures. And so my machine learning algorithm is looking for the concept of a flower, which is kind of otherworldly and quite interesting, but sadly not in a robot form with shiny hands that can do brilliant haircuts. But I think it's still pretty cool nonetheless. So that's the gist of what it is that I do. So once we've gotten to the grit, once we've sort of really explored this with our interviewee every week, I'm also going to be moving on to other questions and weaving that back through the pop culture reference that we have landed on. So how did I get into my research area? I haven't always been an inventor, let's put it that way. I wanted to do biology at university because I love learning about life and how it all fits together, but I didn't know what I wanted to do after uni. So I did my undergraduate at Leicester in biological sciences, and then when I finished, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I took on a position as a teacher in a secondary school and did maternity cover for a year. And in that year, I discovered I didn't like teaching, but I did like learning new things, and so I wanted to go back into academia and see if there was something else I could learn. So I went to Imperial College London and did a master's. And the reason that I went into computational plant science, so hold on, let me go back a step. At undergrad, I knew I wanted to do plant science in my summer school one year because it was a plant science summer school that I took a chance on. And when I was there, we were learning how to use a computer to map the growth of a pine cone. So you could get a computer to generate pine cones using image analysis. I'm describing this really badly, but it's really interesting stuff. Again, I'll try and post it somewhere so you can see. And just seeing this pine cone being recreated in silico on the computer, I realized that this was my true calling. So I went into teaching, didn't like that, remember the pine cone, and then did my master's in computational plant science, and then my PhD, and now I'm working here. That's going to be my nugget of knowledge for people in the future is remember the pine cone. That's everyone will have a pine cone in their life, and you just have to go back and remember it. So I did my PhD, and now I'm here, and now I'm adding the aspect of machine learning. So I'm the inventor. I've been inventing since masters, and I'm at the point in the movie at which I've created my Edward Scissorhands. So hopefully that doesn't mean I die now, and then he has like a really complicated life in small town America, but who knows? So then my next question for myself is one thing I wished people knew about my area of research. And this one is easy for me because it's something that I get asked quite frequently. Because I'm automating research that already exists, a lot of people assume that that means that I'm putting scientists out of jobs. And that is by no means what I'm doing. What I do is to automate systems that are currently having to be done manually using computers to speed up the rate of discovery. So I'm automating all of the tedious bits that researchers hate, that take them ages, and sometimes means that they can't do, that they physically cannot do. So having a look at these images, these thousands of images, and taking all of these measurements would take an incomprehensible amount of time to do. We're talking lifetimes of work just to do like one image set. But my computer can do it in days. And so what this means is that at the very end of my conveyor belt, remember I said that we had these genes that were interesting? Gene discovery is something that is increasing more and more in science, because the rate of gene discovery is increasing so much thanks to computing. So what this means is before researchers would have to manually have a look at genes that were being switched on and off to have a look at how they were related to things that were going on. A really good example of a great gene discovery that was really important, for example, is BRCA1, which has been dubbed the Angelina Jolie gene. It's responsible for breast cancer, so people who have the BRCA1 gene generally have a higher risk of breast, ovarian, and prostate cancer. So the discovery of BRCA1 was really important. Well, imagine if we could speed up the process for gene discovery so that other genes can be discovered much quicker. That's the sort of thing that I'm trying to do. It's not to take anyone out of the job, it's to speed things up so that we can get results quicker. We can get results that can be used to improve agricultural science, so we can get varieties in the field that will survive climate change. That's what the aim is. Okay, this next one is convince someone to move into your area of research. And this is easy. Coding. I love it. Computational science in any format is wonderful. It's like being given a puzzle every time you're trying to do something. There's so much learning that I'm doing all the time, and piecing things together and trying to work out the best way to do something. And when you get a code to run and you can sit back and you watch the numbers going and you can see everything being built up and you get your results out, I've never had a more rewarding experience. Well, no, I guess I've had quite... Okay, that's not true. I really enjoy that aspect of what I do. I think coding's really great. I think it's wonderful. I think anybody who's working in science now should try really hard, especially in biology, try really hard to learn how to code. You will not regret it. It's a bit of a nuisance to get going in it, but once you've got it, it makes your life so much easier. So it's my little plug for coding. It's just wonderful seeing your code work. What's your favourite plant? Wow, I forgot that I put this in my list of questions, but I want to do this to biologists because I've found that if you meet a microbiologist or a chemist or a zoologist, plant scientist, anybody within their topic who works with like a living organism, if you say what's your favourite within that kind of realm, they come out with the most amazing answers often. So I'm going to be really pushing them on this one. Mine, the other thing is that it is like choosing favourite children. So I do have a favourite flower, parasitic plant, tree, but I'm going to go with my tree today because I think it's really interesting. And that's the ginkgo biloba, which is the only species that exists of any ginkgo. So if you see a ginkgo, it's a ginkgo. End of story. And they have these magnificent whale tail shaped leaves that are just gorgeous. They're a lovely green colour in the summer, and in the autumn they go this really golden yellow. And when they fall off of the tree, it's like being bathed in sunlight. It's just it's magnificent. Please look up ginkgo biloba if you haven't seen them. They're also dioecious trees, which means that they come in male and female, so the individual trees are male and female. But when they're grown kind of individually, sometimes they'll grow a branch that's the other gender, so that then they can self-fertilize, which is mad. So you can just have a female tree with a male branch. Yeah, I think they're great. The female plants have the female cones smell really dreadful, but you can't tell what gender they are often until they come to maturity. So there was like a street in France where they planted loads of ginkgos, and it wasn't until 10 years later that they realised that it was a street of female plants and they all smelt really bad in the summertime, which is quite unfortunate. And they are as old as like triceratopses. They're just wonderful. Ginkgos are great. Have a look at ginkgos. I'll also put them on my Instagram and Twitter for you. If I could research anything about ginkgos, what would it be? If there was a way that you could have ginkgos be the beautiful golden colour all year, I would love that. I think it would be really bad for them probably because that's their photosynthetic elements dying. But if I could, and I'm very selfish, I'd have them being that golden colour for longer. So maybe researching how you could do that. Do I do any science outreach? Yes, I do. You can tell. I do this now, which is my podcast, Biologist of It. I did also have a blog that is still live called Fronds with Benefits. I don't really write on it anymore. I do a blog maybe once or twice a year, but it's full of blog posts that are all about different plants and what they do and where you can see them in movies and films and books and things. So you can tell I do love a pop cultural reference. So have a look there. And if you want to find me on social media, you can find this podcast on Instagram and Twitter at Biologist of It. But you can find me as well on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. B. Nichols if you want to find out more about me as a person. Thank you so much for listening today. I feel like that went quite well. I'm really looking forward to seeing this podcast develop. I'm really excited for you to hear the next couple of interviews that I've done already. They have been really interesting with some really great people. And you don't have to just listen to me prattling on, you get more interaction with my guests as well, which is wonderful. So in the second episode, we're going to be meeting someone else very planty, but this time someone who actually works with real tangible plants. He's a lecturer and horticultural specialist from America and has a very successful podcast. Hopefully there will be some people who I already know on Twitter who will know who I'm talking about, and I can't wait for you to hear the interview very soon. Thank you so much for being here. This has been the Biologist of It. You have been wonderful, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you in the next one. Bye!